Now, welcome everyone to the Spring Grant Workshop webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording, which will also contain today's slides, will be posted on Olga later this week. This webinar will cover grant administration procedures for agencies awarded funding from DRPT. You should all be able to hear me. I have you on mute so that we don't have any background noise interference. So if you cannot hear, there's some audio problems, please let me know by putting a message in the chat box, which I'll show you how to do in a minute if you're not familiar with the webinar. So this webinar, if you have a project or program that's contained in the 6-year improvement program that was just approved last week by the Commonwealth Transportation Board, this webinar will cover the procedures you will need to follow to administer that grant. So procedures detailing how do you execute the project agreement, how do you receive reimbursements from DRPT, and what do you do if the project needs more time to be completed, and more will be covered today. So all of these procedures are taken from DRPT's fiscal year 2020 grant administration procedures document. You can download this document or view it on our Olga website, and I'll show you where that is. So if you're familiar with Olga and you go to the Olga login page, you don't even need to log in to get to the grant procedures document. Just click on News and Information. And then you'll need to scroll down a little bit until you come to yes. All right, until you come to the grant procedures. All right. So we actually have reached our maximum number of attendees. So give me a minute. I'm going to see if I thought it was more than that. So if not, we might need to. All right, so right here is the grant administration procedures link. You just click on that and the document will pull up. And then you can download it or just read it from here. So that's that easy. You don't even need to log into Olga to do that. All right. So we're going to try to get a few more people on the webinar. I think for some reason we have a maxed out number, which was not anticipated, since we thought we had more people. I thought it was unlimited, but in the meantime, we'll try to see if we can get some more people on here. Yeah, I'll just kind of go to the rest. So we have a lot of things to cover today and on our procedures. It's an interactive webinar, so we want you to ask a lot of questions. We want to make sure you leave here with some good knowledge of the procedures. And obviously, throughout the year, we recommend you contact your DRPT program manager for questions and answers and any concerns you might have about the procedures. We are here to help you. But to ask questions during the webinar, the first way to do it is using the chat box down here. So you can type a message in to anybody. You can make the message viewed by everyone on the webinar, or you can just send it to me. I'm the organizer. If you want to just send it to me and not have everyone see. We can do some phone questions too. It's a little more complicated, but if you really don't want to do a chat question and you really have to talk to if If you're going as the attendees box, if you go into that window, and under you, if you raise your hand, you click on this. Actually, you cannot see that. If you go into the attendees, you'll see at the top row, there's a microphone, and then all the way on the right, there's a little hand. If you click on that box in that column, that raises your hand. That lets me know that you want to ask a question, and then I can unmute your phone so you can ask a question. But those are the methods to do it, and I really encourage you guys to put in a chat question as we go. What we will do is, as we reach the end of a topic, agenda topic, we will pause there, and I will read out the questions that have come through, and our DRPT panelists will answer those questions as we go. So I want to give you time throughout the webinar to answer questions and ask questions. Don't wait till the end of a slide or agenda topic. You can put in your chat questions at any time so that we can get to them. Our goal is to get to everyone's questions before today. We have a group here. We're kind of doing the main broadcast out of DRPT's Richmond office. We have some people here locally visiting us too, a small group, and then also in our DRPT Northern Virginia office in Alexandria, there's a small group there. So as those folks in those offices ask questions, we'll be able to either read them out to you guys if you can't hear, to make sure you hear the question before we answer them. So like I said, everyone is on mute right now, so it can limit the background noise. And with that, we're going to get started with the webinar. So I'm Chris Raby. I'm the manager of statewide mobility programs. Today's webinar is covering a lot of topics. And again, the procedures presented today are all for DRPT grants you get from DRPT, and they're for all DRPT grant programs. So there's nothing, unless we specifically say this is for this grant program, just consider everything we say covering your grant. All right, so but we will say if something's specific to a specific grant program. All right, so our agenda today, we've covered agenda item number 1, but we're going to talk about development and execution of the grant agreements. This is basically how do you sign your grant agreement. That starts everything going. Without that signed, you can't get reimbursed. And that's the next thing we want to talk about today is grant reimbursements. Then we'll talk about time extension requests if you need more time with your project and your end date is approaching. Project budget and scope change requests. We'll also talk about some training assistance we have, project oversight. How do you close out your grant at the end of the year or when it's finished? Asset management, safety plans. We're going to give you an update on Smart Scale, and then we'll wrap up with what's going on now and some next steps and what's coming up in the future. All right? So with that, I'm going to start out with agenda item number 1, development and execution of grant agreements. And here is Marie Berry, who's our manager of financial program, to cover that information.
Good morning, everybody. Most of you already know all these steps, having done this for several years, and they haven't really changed very much. So hopefully this is just a review for everybody on the phone and present here. So obviously, the CTV has approved the 6-year plan as of last Wednesday. So now we are in the middle of actually creating all the project agreements that we're going to be loading, other than the ones that are federally funded, of course. But we are in the middle of creating all the state agreements and loading them into Olga for you all to review and approve and execute. So I guess the key steps are in June. Of course, CTV is already approved. We're writing the agreements. In August, we'll start preparing the federal agreements and putting those in Olga as well. All our agreements go through an internal review by your program managers, the division administrators, finance, and then gets passed on to you. There should be an email that goes out to your master users in Olga to let them know an agreement is ready for your execution. After you execute it, it comes back to us, and our agency head or our CFO will execute it, and then it's fully ready for reimbursements to be processed. Okay, do you want to start? Or do you want me to do it? Oh, okay, all right. Okay. So the state agreements are fairly simple, but if you have flexible STP coming your way, again, CTB has approved it last week. All your funding needs to be in your TIP and your STIP, and hopefully that process has already happened. If it's not, has not already happened, it should be in process. We try to flex your flexible STP before September. And that's something that VDOT and us, we really like to get those started because the FTA tends to take a while to get your money secured. So we like to get that process started as early as possible. The rules are, it has to be in your TIP and the STIP. The FTA has to approve the flex of the funds from FHWA to FTA before I can even ask VDOT to start the process. So make sure you're starting an application with FTA. The FTA requires you to at least put the funding amount and the project in your applications. It doesn't have to be completed all the way, but they need that minimum of information in there. And they will let me know if I can go ahead and proceed with the flex process. Once the FTA approves the project funding in your, after I flex the money over and you get your grants approved, you need to let me know what your FTA grant number is and award number, and that way I can start your state match agreements. And again, it goes through the same process with the agreements. It's posted to Olga, it goes through an internal review, you execute it, we execute it, then it's ready for reimbursement request.
Here we go.
Okay. All right. If you get other federal funds other than flexible CT, again, if it's money that we are getting for you, federal funds that we are getting for you, I'm in the process right now of getting our federal funds executed with the FTA, and then we'll write the agreements after the FTA approves our grant application. If you are getting the federal money from the FTA, so if it's 5307, 5339 money, then again, you just need to let me know when the FTA awards the grant, and then we will write the state match agreements based on that award. And once again, it goes through an internal process, comes to you for execution, and then comes back to us for execution. And then the funds are ready to go. Okay. Do that? Go? Okay.
Wait,
Yeah, well, that's right. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. If it's CMAQ or RSP funds, and I don't think very many of you still get that, but you'll just, it's treated like a flexible STP. You just need to make sure you start an application with the FTA, make sure the funds are in the TIP and the STIP, and then request the funds be transferred over to the FTA, and it goes through the exact same process as before. Okay, we can keep going. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right, so this year we had the merit contract, or merit system to evaluate your project. So as part of that, your contracts for vehicles and support vehicles so not just your revenue vehicles, but your support vehicles. If you are replacing them, we're going to put VIN numbers in your contract because you are required to be replacing specific vehicles, and we are going to be checking for that. So just make sure that when you're checking your contracts with the VIN numbers that we've got the right VIN numbers in there for you. They should be based on what was in your application, so hopefully those are right. And those will be included in your contract. So it's going to be a little bit longer if you have several replacement vehicles in your contract. But just note that in the appendix section, we will be adding VIN numbers. Okay. All right. So the last thing, when you do get your agreement, please, please, please review it. Because if I have to change it after it's been executed, it's an amendment. So it's very important that you read the whole contract. If there's a problem with it, you just let me know. And if it's something we can change easily, then we'll change it right there. But just know that you are the first person executing the agreement, so it's got to be perfect. So make sure start and end dates are good. Make sure the scope is what you intend it to be, and and it should be in agreement with what was approved in the 6-year plan. If it's not, then we got a scope issue. So just make sure that everything is in there, and make sure the person who is pinning the agreement is authorized to do so. So if you've got like a city manager or somebody that only executes agreements once in a blue moon, and they don't want access to Olga, then get a letter from them giving you authorization to pin on his behalf, his or her behalf. And just keep that letter with you, or send me a copy of that letter. But you need to make sure your agreements are executed by the appropriate parties, or else it's not a valid agreement. So, and we can get the money back. So it's important for you. Make sure it's signed by the right people. And that's it.
All right. Thank you, Marie. Are there any questions for Marie on any of that she just covered? I'm not seeing any. Not seeing anyone in the chat. So with that, anyone here? Okay. So, all right. So with that, we will continue on to the next topic, and Gabe, I just opened up your mic, so this is your slide. Actually, Gabe, you have the next two.
Chris, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, yes.
All right, good. All right, so I'll pick it up from here. The next few slides will be talking about grant reimbursements. So I'll just touch on some of the key information here. These slides are actually very full of information, so you can always refer back to these if you can download the presentation. A lot of this will be pretty much old hat for everybody. For some, this will be new, especially on the TDM side, where we'll be now requesting reimbursements for the TDM operating grant. So again, in few of you, this will be totally brand new. The one thing we want to emphasize here, at least from the TDM side, and transit folks, feel free to chime in as well. But you know, we would like the reimbursements to come in at least quarterly. And for me, as a program manager, that kind of serves two purposes. One, if there is something that's ineligible or an issue, going back to fix it won't be as bad as if we have to go back and fix a reimbursement that covers 6, 7, 8 months. So for that, we'd like to do these quarterly. Additionally, I think it's just easier to review, again, being a little selfish here, but a little easier to review 3 months worth of reimbursements as opposed to, again, 2 quarters worth or half a year's worth. So I'll keep that in mind when doing your reimbursements. Here are a few bullets that are essentially we'll go over in more detail in the next upcoming slides. One thing I'll also add, if you don't have it already, is to get Adobe Acrobat, and I don't mean the reader, but the actual software. you can create the PDF documents and very easily organize and manipulate the docs. You can write on there if you have to. So that's just a tip. It's was super helpful for me as a grantee. So if you don't have it, I would suggest you get it. So next slide, we'll be talking about kind of the key steps of the reimbursement. Make sure that all the invoices you have, especially from vendors, are clear enough to us to know what was going on. I know a lot of the contractors you've worked with for a while and have good relationships, so you kind of have a good idea of what's going on with the work they're doing. But for us, a lot of it's new, so make sure the invoices are clear in terms of what was done, and you know, we'll get invoices that have 2-3 word descriptions and they just don't really help us in that respect. So make sure your contractors flesh out a little bit what they did. Brittany and Neil, do you guys have anything to add for 5310 or 5311? If you do, go ahead and jump in.
No, we'll cover that when we get to the summary sheet.
Okay. Okay, good. So, for the most part, yeah, the common thread you'll be hearing from me today is really detail and information. More information is always going to be better than less, so keep that in mind. So next slide, Chris, if you can.
All right. Yeah, Gabe, I'm going to interrupt here. We got Pamela Miller.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Pamela Miller, you've got your hand raised. It sounds like you have a question. So I'm going to. All right, Pamela, I just unmuted you, so if you want to jump in with your question. No, okay, it's not staying on mute.
Authorized to pen an agreement.
Okay. Can you repeat that one more time?
How does one know if they are authorized to pen an agreement?
Were you
Chris,
asking about who's?
She broke up, so we didn't hear her here at Nova.
Yeah. Pamela, repeat that one more time. You're kind of getting
I'm
broken
sorry,
up.
I'm on my computer. This was for the previous speaker, and I was wondering how, and I've tried to chat it, how does one know if you are authorized to pen an agreement?
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
I had you all.
How do you know if you're authorized?
All right. So Pam, I think your question is, how do you know if you're authorized to sign the grant agreements? So typically in your organization, there are certain people that are designated to bind your organization to a contract, particular or a financial agreement. That's usually set up in some formal fashion. Now they can give people that that person can delegate some of that authority, in the memo or writing, temporarily for certain things. But usually there is a designee. It's usually either the director or the CFO. So that I would just check with your director or CFO and just to make sure, you know who that is.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank
Chris,
you.
we have a question up here.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm familiar with I think I'm familiar with the TDM operating and mobility programs, the summary report.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're already giving you quarterly roughly.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, so especially for the TDM folks, I know all of you working with me do a progress report every quarter. My goal, it's just a timing thing, would be to have that reimbursement, combined with the progress report, and that will be everything I need to do our quarterly meetings. Now, the transit folks, I don't know if you guys have different ideas, but speaking strictly for the NOVA TDM folks, again, my goal will be this second bullet on this slide. That summary report can essentially be your progress reports that you all submit to me every quarter. And the goal would be, at that point, we almost don't have to have a quarterly report because I'll be receiving so much information with the reimbursement itself that, we'll still do our meetings, but these can in essence, take place of everything you've given me before for the quarterly.
And we're doing a reasonably good job in Arlington with that.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
So
yeah.
ideally, the meeting, if we did have a quarterly meeting, it could happen after the submittal of the invoice package and that progress report, and if there are issues, we have all those materials in front of us.
Exactly.
And it'll be a
And then
Exactly.
my second piece is, in the, where it says 5310, mobility management reimbursements, an updated mobility management work plan. So if we had a mobility management reimbursements in a quarterly fashion that we were submitting, how is that a different process from that bullet above?
I don't think it will be. I mean, I think each program manager will have different nuances in how they want to schedule and then also what they want to get, but it shouldn't be any different. Yeah, I know 5310 aren't grants I work specifically.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah, so
Okay.
David, I don't, yeah.
Do we have
that's
anything
you.
like that? Okay.
No.
Then I just won't worry too much.
Yeah, I think,
Because those other two bullets, then if Arlington doesn't have them, I won't ask
Exactly.
more probing questions. Someone else can.
and I think Neil said down in Richmond they'll cover that eventually. So.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
that's a good question.
Thanks.
Hey, and we'll cover the 5310 reporting later on the slide. So for those of you who didn't know, I didn't introduce Gabe. That's Gabe Ortiz. He's our Northern Virginia mobility manager, mobility programs manager. So thanks, Gabe. All right, so I think we covered all the questions for now. So I'm going to move on. So next, you're going to hear from Neil Sherman. He's our Director of Statewide Transit Programs, and he's going to, there you go. He's going to talk to you about the summary sheet that we all need.
So, as Gabe said earlier, one of the requirements of the reimbursement process is a summary sheet. And from our experience, issues with reimbursements have been from the lack of summary sheets that doesn't, and so the invoices end up being sort of disorganized. So this is just one sample. We're listing all the items that you're invoicing on, and that way it's easier for accounts payable, who reviews this first at the RBT, and then the project manager to use this as a guide of checking the payments back behind it. There are numerous other ways of creating a sample sheet, and you can certainly work with your project manager to do that, sometimes even listing these, the items that you're billing, but also putting a page number of where you can find the details of that is very helpful. So, again, this is just one sample, but please work with your project manager on these, because many of you have large capital or large projects that have multiple line items, and if they're not operating, but they are either capital or discretionary, you really need to have backup behind it. And this is probably one of our key findings of errors in reimbursement sheets.
All right, thank you, Neil. So now we're going to talk about supporting documents that are needed for reimbursement requests. So now that you've got the summary sheet with the listing of every single expense you're charging, every one of those expenses needs some type of supporting documents behind it to show the expense, what it was, and what it was for. So, and they should be, and you should put the documents in order as the expenses are listed on that summary sheet. It just makes things easy for us to find, and we don't have to go digging around or calling you up to ask questions about it. So keep them in that order. There are some things to note with these when you put the documents in there. So you want to see, things like invoices that you get, that you pay. Those are your support documents. But if you've got an expense, but you're splitting that charge between between a couple projects. Note that on your invoice, and also on the summary sheet, you should note it on there, either in a separate column of this is what's being charged, and this is the total invoice, but this is what's being charged to the project. And put a little note there on the invoice of where the other charge is going, so that it's clear that that particular payment for that invoice, 100% of it is not being billed to this particular reimbursement request. So be clear on those things. Include if you have contractors doing work, I'm sure when they bill you, you're getting a lot of support documents from them on what work they did and things. We want to see that too. Don't just give us a one pager that says our contractor's billing was, $15,000 this month. We want to see the back details on what work they performed. All right, so just some examples of supporting documents. If you're charging staff time, you're calculating this probably from some payroll system. We want to see that either print out of the payroll system showing the staff charges, including benefits, or however you do that. We want to see some documentation towards that. You can't, rather than just putting a number on that summary sheet. There's got to be something to support that, how you came up with that charge. Any work performed by contractors, we want to see some of their summary. Like I said, invoices, documents. If you're doing marketing and promotions, copies of those advertisements and things that you've done would be very helpful. Any reports or plans, or if you had a meeting and you did your contractor made a PowerPoint presentation, we would like to see all those copies too. So anything that's produced with the money from the project and you're billing for it, we want to see those documents. Everything that's, everything you pay, we want to see some type of document with that, receipts. If something isn't something where you can get it in a hard, paper document, an image of it or something, a shot of it, it works too. So the point here is just making sure that we have all the documentation to, one, understand what you're charging for and how it was being used, but also justifying the expenses. And I will state this: so every single document or page in the PDF that you send us, someone here at DRPD has to look at that and review it. So we don't like looking at documents any more than you do. We don't like the work. So when we say we need these documents, it's because we have to have these documents, not because we like, going through this work. It is a pain in the butt for us too, just like you guys, to have to go through these stacks of documents. But it's necessary so that if auditors come behind us or anyone asks questions, they're going to ask us first. So if we've got the information there, it just makes things a lot easier. So, sorry for having to put together stacks of documents to scan and upload into Olga, but like I said, we have to look at every single one of those pages. So it's no picnic for us either, but it's a necessary thing to do.
Okay, I want to review a little bit about indirect costs. It should have been included as a line item budget category in the application. Grant recipients must prepare a cost allocation plan with calculation of indirect cost rate. For those who are getting federal money, and I guess it varies from the small urbans, and 5311s, there is a requirement to have not only submit to DRBT, but we submit the 5311 ones to FTA for their approval. If you do have a approval letter from a VDOT or a federal agency, you probably want to also submit that to us. FTA, under the new recent years of guidance, you can there is a requirement or eligible requirement that you can have a minimum rate of 10% without an indirect cost plan. This is something we'll be using as a requirement allowed for the 5310 operating grants. And what is not listed also to notify the 5311s, and we will be doing this formally in the next few weeks, we will be doing a review of all 5311 indirect cost allocation plans. You'll probably see a email come to you to request the plans and some questionnaires, and that'll probably start certainly shortly after July 4th, just to review the beginning part of the plans, and then we'll probably go through a process of assisting 5311s to have a proper indirect cost allocation plan that we'll be submitting to FTA in the years to come.
All right, thank you, Neil. Kelly Hitchcock, I'm going to unmute you. You've had your hand raised for a little bit, so let me get you. Come on, Kelly.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Go ahead with your question.
And I'm sorry, I was going to say I was just about to write a question, but y'all answered the question that I was going to ask, so I apologize. That's why I didn't write it.
Okay, all right. Are you good then?
I am. Thank you. Sorry.
All right, thanks, Kelly. No worries. Oops. All right, so now I'm going to talk about travel reimbursement. So we have, and again, this is a lot of, all the stuff we're talking about, it's in more detail in our grant administration procedures document. So I will remind you and encourage you to go download that document to take a look at the details. But for a lot of folks, or some folks, doing a reimbursement request it's going to be a new thing, particularly for the TDM operating folks. So we wanted to cover travel reimbursements, and really I sort of categorize them, and these are not official categories of travel. You can't go to any federal guidelines or state guidelines and say, oh, here's regular travel and special travel. But for the purposes of this presentation, I just put travel into those categories. So regular travel means your travel to do your program. So you've got regular meetings you've got to go to, you've got outreach, you've got meetings with businesses or folks you got to go to, just more local travel. That's as part of your everyday kind of work. That's one kind of category. And then the category I'm just calling special travel, which is, training and workshops and conferences, any overnight travel. This is something that it's not part of your operations. It may be something you're learning, you're going to somewhere to learn, or to get certifications or things. So I'm kind of couching those, or just categorizing those, travel into those categories. So we follow the GSA and IRS rates and rules for travel. So any overnight stay for hotel rates and per diem rates, those are GSA rates. For mileage, you're taking the IRS rates. Those apply. Those rates also apply to your contractors. So you need to let your contractors know to get those rates. In many cases, if you're a local government, you can provide them with a letter that they're working on a project for you so that they can get a government rate. If that doesn't work, contact your DRPT program manager and we'll see how we can help. But we want to make sure everyone, even your contractors, are following those rates, because that's the only rate we can pay for. And so we're really, in the past there might have been some wiggle room on that, but there is no wiggle room anymore. We really are sticking to that rate. That applies to DRPT staff too, so it's not anything we're applying differently for you guys. Overall, particularly if you have overnight travel, but also if you're going to a training or a conference, we encourage you to get what we're just calling a pre-check. Get a pre-check with your DRPT program manager, just to let them know this is what you're planning on doing. The last thing we want you to do is incur costs for travel and then put in the reimbursement for that and then realize that something was ineligible. And so we want you to get that up front, just, check in with them saying, look, these are the people who want to go to this conference. This is what the conference is about. And they can help you through that to make sure the right people are going and the rules are followed. Again, we don't want you guys to incur a cost that is not eligible for reimbursement and now you're stuck with it. So we also recommend doing a travel summary sheet with your travel reimbursement, similar to the overall summary sheet. So the travel summary sheet will have, again, the dates of the travel, where it was, what the expense was, all those types of things. And also, as we, keep saying, we need support documentation. All of that travel information needs some support documentation. Mileage, we want to see a printout of a map, some direction map showing the miles and the location. Receipts. So make sure you get receipts for things. Any type of expense, it's good to have a receipt so we're not questioning the charge or can't find the charge. I will say on mileage, make sure that what you're charging on your summary sheet matches the map that you've printed out. So if you're charging 25 miles, but the trip map says 20 miles, that's an inconsistency that we want to have. So we want to make sure they're matching up. And I'll mention something on tolls because this has come up too. Also, if you're actually paying a toll, you want to make sure the trip map also shows that you were on the road that pays the tolls, not a non-toll road, because you want those things to match up. Get receipts for tolls. I know some of them tolls you don't have place to pay, so you can't get someone in the toll booth to give you a receipt. But if you've got a Easy Pass, you can print out the Easy Pass report to show the expenses. My personal feeling on tolls is that if you can avoid the tolls, avoid the tolls. Tolls, just like anything else with travel, things for convenience are not things, where they're higher costs for convenience are not reimbursable. So same thing with tolls. I know in Northern Virginia the tolls can be pretty high, and unless you're really, running late or there's an accident that you've got to take the toll road to get there in time for your meeting, I would say, avoid the tolls unless you really have to, and that way you don't have to get the receipts. And speaking of receipts, so, here's a listing of things we need to have on, a summary list of the travel expenses is fine. We use one here at DRPT. So if you don't have one, if the way you do travel internally doesn't have this type of information, talk to your DRPT program manager. They can help you with it. But we need the date of travel, the address of the destination, the name, if you're going to meetings, name and purpose of the meeting or conference or training, the miles traveled if you're charging for mileage, how you calculate the miles expense. We want to make sure you're using the right IRS rate. Again, receipts for parking and tolls. We would like you to include agendas for meetings and conferences and workshops and training. As I mentioned before, travel maps showing the route taken and the mileage and the tolls. And again, get receipts for everything. That just makes things easy, and there's no question through an audit when we have to find out, what that expense was. And I'm going to pause there before we go to Todd Horsley on time extensions to see if, so far, what we've covered in reimbursements, if anyone has a question. And I do not see any in the chat log, so. Okay. All right, so I got a couple questions. Let's see if I do this. So Christy Straight, I just unmuted you, so if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, when we do the travel pre-check, because it does take a little bit of time, if the hotel rate changes, we need to notify you before the travel event happens?
As long as the rate you're going to charge to the grant is equal to the allowable GSA rate.
Okay.
You don't even have to let us know that, because that's all we're going to pay. So
right.
It should be that. So another thing you can do on that, when you do have a hotel that happens to be higher than the GSA rate, and I've just had to do this recently, is that you can pay the full amount, but then when you charge to DRPT, you will apply the tax rate to the GSA rate. So you'll recalculate the taxes on that. And that's the amount to charge. So show those calculations on your invoice.
Okay.
All right. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
You're welcome. All right. So Kelly Hitchcock, your hand's still raised. You still have a question?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh,
No,
okay.
Sorry about that. I didn't
That's
realize
okay.
that. I apologize.
That's all right.
I've undone it.
Okay, I'm going to, I lost my list here. Okay. What happened to that? Here we go. All right. So our next presenter is Todd Horsley, and Todd is the Director of Northern Virginia Transit Programs. Oh, sorry, wait, hang on a sec, Todd. We got a question in-house. So the question here in the Richmond office was, how do you show the match when you do a reimbursement, and how do you do that? Actually, you don't need to show that, because when you go into Olga and you put in your total expenses, your total charges, Olga's going to figure out your match. So whether or not you have a local match or a local and a state match to a federal grant, it'll figure it out. So you're good on that. Yep, just put the total expenses. That's correct. All right, Todd, I unmuted you guys so you can go cover time extension request.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, before I start, we did have a question here in the NOVA office, and it actually goes back to the indirect cost rates. We could not figure out how to get your attention. So we're going to ask that.
So the question is just clarification on the cost allocation requirements, submittable cost allocation plan. What are the thresholds? Typically, from the feds, there's a threshold. If your force account exceeds $10 million, you have to get a pre-approval from FTA or federal agency. And then if I think it's above 100,000, it's probably more than that, but you just have to have one on hand. So I'm just trying to determine, what's the DRPT requirement for the cost allocation plan submittal, and when do you have to get it approved, and when do you just have to have it on hand, on file with your contract documents?
So we are basically, maybe the answer to that is following FTA rules on our process of cost allocation. So
okay.
Whatever FTA has told you, we're following the same rules. And there are some things of when FTA expects those to be done and redone over time, and how they're done and reviewed. So we're this time following those rules.
Okay.
I know to get into the specific things, requirements.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, this is, again, Todd Horsley in the Northern Virginia office, and I'm going to cover the next two topics on our agenda today. But before we continue with those, I do want to, I guess, first and foremost emphasize that DRPT wants your projects to be successful, and we would not be awarding funding for a project that we don't want to see succeed. So with that said, with regard to time extension requests, it's DRPT's expectation that grant recipients will complete grant-funded projects within the schedule contained in the grant agreement, and that those schedules are usually actually provided by you in the grant application. DRPT has a finite amount of funding to award each year, and we expect that the funding we do award will be put to use immediately. We do recognize that for a variety of reasons, grant recipients may sometimes need additional time to complete projects. In those cases, grant recipients may request an extension of the end date of a project. Project time extension requests are discussed in Chapter 8 of DRPT's FY20 Grant Administration Procedures. So grant recipients should always keep their program managers updated on the status of their projects and inform the program manager well in advance if it looks like a time extension may be needed. If a time extension will be needed, then the extension request must be submitted in Olga at least 30 days before the end date of the grant. And the reason for that is, depending on the circumstances of the time extension request, between 3 and 6 DRPT staff have to approve a request. So it takes us a little bit of time to actually review and approve requests. So again, it is our expectation that projects will be completed on schedule without the need for a time extension, but if a time extension is needed, then grant recipients may submit one extension request for a maximum of 12 months. And exceptions to this should be very rare. There's no guarantee, and you're going to see this on all the slides I'm going to present, there is no guarantee that a request for an extension will be approved. It is important that grant recipients submit realistic project schedules in your grant applications and keep in regular communication with your program manager on the status of projects. And if you can go to the next slide, which I think you already did. So again, time extension requests should be submitted in Olga. Requests should contain a detailed explanation of the need for a time extension with sufficient information for DRPT to make a decision. So in this instance, less is not more. The more information you can give us, as long as it is relevant to the request, the better. Requests should also contain a new project schedule with updated milestones and a projected financial drawdown schedule. And again, grant recipients should keep their program managers updated on the status of their projects and inform the program manager well in advance if it looks like a time extension may be needed. And there is no guarantee that a request for an extension will be approved, and DRPT may actually modify or approve an extension different from the one that you request. So if you were to tell us that you need 3 extra months for a delivery of a bus, but you request a 1-year extension, then we're probably going to modify that for a 3-month, possibly a 6-month extension. So I'll stop there and ask if anyone has any questions on time extension requests. And I can't see the screen, Chris, so if anyone does, please unmute them.
Yeah, Todd, I'm not seeing any chat or other questions.
Okay, well, we can move on. So budget and scope changes. So DRPT also recognizes that grant recipients may sometimes wish or need to change the scope of a project after it has been awarded, or a recipient may need additional funding to complete a project. So budget and scope changes should be rare, but as with time extension requests, grant recipients should keep their program managers updated on the status of their projects and inform their program manager well in advance if it looks like a budget or scope change may be needed. Project budget and scope change requests are discussed in Chapter 9 of DRPT's FY20 Grant Administration Procedures. The requests for budget and scope changes are not submitted in Olga. The forms for requesting budget and scope changes can be obtained from your program manager. Scope changes may be allowed if the change does not materially alter the original intent of the project, and we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. DRPT is legally required to seek CTB approval for budget changes in excess of $200,000, so that would add time to your request. If that's the case, please factor in that time. And DRPT does not permit funds to be reprogrammed between different projects, nor do we permit grant recipients to purchase anything outside of the project scope just to spend down the remaining balance of a grant. And again, I have to say on this one as well, there is no guarantee that a budget or scope change request will be approved. So as I noted earlier, scope changes may be allowed if the change does not materially alter the original intent of the project. And some examples of this are included on the slide. It may be an increase or decrease in the number of units of whatever it is you're buying with the grant, a change in a revenue vehicle type, a change in the length of a revenue vehicle. You know, if your applicant or your grant award had purchasing hardware, then a conversion and buying software instead, or vice versa, that would also probably not be a material change. I do want to just say with the implementation of merit, the way that DRPT evaluates budget and scope change requests will probably change, as scope changes will likely necessitate the rescoring of projects that were awarded through the merit prioritization process. I think we'll stop here for questions and then turn it over to Gabe to talk about budget. So these are basically transit budget and scope change requests. And after, we'll take questions here, and then Gabe will talk about TDM budget and scope change requests. And again, Chris, I can't see the screen, so I don't know if there's any questions out there.
I don't see any questions out there, so go ahead, proceed.
Okay, Chris, you can go to the next slide. So for the TDM grants, I hope everybody TDM program managers were paying attention to Todd, because I really can't add much more to what he said. We, on our side of the shop, pretty much follow the exact same policy. So make sure that any changes you do have aren't completely new activities or something completely out of the quote-unquote scope of what your work plan was. We will scrutinize something like that a lot more and probably not allow it. So any 180-degree turns to what you said you were going to do will probably not be approved unless there's really, really good reasoning behind it. What's up?
What I can understand, I can come up with scenarios that would look like scope changes.
Yeah.
I can't come up with a scenario that's a budget change. Does that mean we could ask for more budget?
Yeah, no, I had an example. Yeah, so in the when you're talking about a budget change, if you have a project that, let's say, you're going to have to add dollars to it just because you want to, and this might include, usually a budget change is going to be part of a scope change as well. So let's say you have a project and you want to switch gears as to what marketing you want to use. You want to do print ads or something that's going to increase the budget. So that's going to have a good chance of being approved because you're staying within the scope. You're still doing this marketing campaign. You're just changing how you're going to deliver it, but you're going to use something that's going to cost more money. So that's when we'll say, all right, scope change sounds good. You're not changing it. Budget sounds good. Now, the one thing is, if you take away or if you add to something, you're taking away from something. So that's what I'll want to know. In other words, you have...
Okay, so it's a budget change, not of the total budget of your project, but of one item.
Of one item.
Taking from another item potentially.
Exactly.
Okay.
Activity with
We can't mid project say, hey, DRPT, you got an extra $20,000?
No, you're still working with the same pot of money.
Okay.
And what was approved.
Okay.
Initially. So yes. Yeah.
And actually, Dave and I just went through this a couple months ago.
Yeah. So at least, on my end, and I'm sure transit folks will agree, if you're going to add or take away from something, we want to know what the overall budget implications to everything else.
Right.
There should be, right?
Like transit could say, like, they want to buy two small buses for the price of one big bus because it turns out that that's better going to meet their needs.
Yeah.
Is there a specific amount that we have to ask for the reallocation? Like, say, for instance, if it's over 5,000 or over 1,000?
Yeah, Chris I think there isn't like one amount that triggers one process over another. Okay. Rule of thumb is, and it actually might be in the guidelines. Yeah. Just stick to the fine, man. Don't change it. No, but yeah, Chris, is there a hard number that's going to trigger this process? I don't know if we explicitly state it.
So, Dave, are you asking for the TDM grants?
Yeah.
So for line item budget changes, typically,
exactly. Yeah.
No, we don't have a hard number because people, if we say percentage, a percentage of the small amount could be, just $100. So we're not going to do a formal process, but I think it's good to let your program manager know if you're making some changes to the, switching money, or you want to switch money between line items, and we'll work it from there. Obviously, if it's $5,000 or $10,000 or more, we're probably going to, we're going to want you to do a formal budget, change request. But if it's $100, it's not going to be a big deal. I don't think we're going to go with the formal form, but it's always good to let us know what's going on and if you have a change.
Yeah, and I would assume, the best policy is at the end of the day, let us know about any change you're going to make. If you're going to not buy Post-it notes this month, we probably don't need to know that. But if you're going to add, your printer is on the fritz and it's done and it's out of everyone's control and that's going to cost $3,000, then yeah, we'll want to know that. That should be it, Chris, on my end for this slide.
Okay, are there any, I don't see any questions at this point. Again, you can ask them at any time or write them into the chat box at any time. I'm trying to monitor that. So without seeing any others, we'll move on. Again, if you think of a question before we end, just go ahead and type it in the chat box. We'll get to it.
Okay, and so this is information about the RTAP and small urban scholarships at DRBT.
You did something there, so.
Hey guys, if you could put yourself on mute, so we get a little feedback from you.
So this is information about the RTAP and small urban scholarship programs. DRBT administers both these training scholarship programs, the FTA Rural Transit Assistance Program, which is for 5311 operators and 5310 programs, and the state-funded Small Urban Transit Program, which is for small urban 5307 programs. And again, these programs are to assist operations of further development of management skills and to encourage the development of professional networks by attending transit training, seminars, workshops, and conferences. RTAP and small urban scholarships requests must be submitted through the OGA application process, the same process as you do for other applications. All approved RTAP grants will be reimbursed up to 100% of eligible expenses, and this is probably a new for some of the small urbans, but all approved small urban grants will be reimbursed up to 90% of eligible expenses. So there will be a 5% local match on those projects and requests.
I don't see any questions. Nope.
Okay, switching gears a little bit, talking about continue with project oversight, engineering oversight. This is a requirement to notify DRBT at the beginning of a construction project. Hopefully, in most cases, DRBT has been involved with your planning of the process, and when you're doing planning or feasibility studies or in the application process. But the following steps are possible based on the project in question. Review of RFPs. DRBT must review and sign off on all construction RFPs prior to advertisement. Review of design documents. DRBT must participate in the review of all construction design documents at 30%, 60%, 9%, and 100%. Project reports, result documents. DRBT will require monthly construction project reports, budget, and schedule updates. And again, in some cases, DRBT may actually contract with some of our own engineering bench contracts to help us do the review of these projects. Yeah.
All right. Hey, Todd, this first slide's yours, and then Neil's going to take the next one after that on the project review.
Okay. All right. So quarterly program and project review. So DRBT project oversight is discussed in Chapter 11 of our FY20 grant administration procedures. As part of our program and project oversight responsibilities, DRBT will schedule regular program and project reviews with grant recipients. These shall generally be quarterly on-site reviews, but depending on the relative size of the grant recipient and its number of active grant projects, then these reviews may sometimes be conducted by phone with at least an annual on-site visit. For Section 5310 grant recipients, program and project reviews will generally be held once a year with a site meeting at least once every 3 years. So program and project reviews will be conducted by DRBT's transit program managers, and they will include a discussion of each active grant project, including a report on the status of the project, any known issues affecting the project, a financial review of the project, and whether any time extensions, scope or budget changes, or funding the obligations are anticipated in the near future. The reviews will also include a review or a discussion of current performance data and asset management information, federal and state compliance issues, including follow-up on issues identified in DRBT compliance audits. And then also, it's an opportunity for DRBT to give any technical assistance that might be needed by the grant recipient. So DRPT is interested in hearing feedback and ideas from the grant recipients during these reviews. So the program and project reviews really should be conducted as a discussion between partners. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Neil to talk about the next slide.
So again, just continuing on quarterly reports and program reviews. For the most part, in the 5311s and the first line piece is safety and security reviews, which will be done as part of a 5307 process. For 5311, these are some things that will be covered: Title VI, ADA complaints, preventive maintenance, and this will also be done for the 5310 grantees at times of reviews, the annual review and triennial. 5311 drug and alcohol review will be done. These also may be done separately with an annual review by DRBT, depending on the needs of any drug and alcohol review of the 5311 program. Those who receive pass-through from FTA funds from DRBT will also be reviewed for the following: recipient compliance with FTA requirements, generally every 3 years, compliance with drug and alcohol requirements. And then on the state smart scale projects, review of original scopes and project activities, budget expenditure review, and milestone updates.
All right. I'm going to pause there. So as I mentioned earlier, I was asking folks to use the chat box to ask questions. There is a question, another question box to do, and apparently people were using that box instead. So I was trying to put all the questions in one place, and so folks have been asking questions in the other place other than the chat box. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit and ask some questions and get some follow up some questions that were sitting in the question box, but not the chat box. So Barb Creel, you were asking, is there a template or form for monthly facility construction reports?
No, but we will certainly work with each recipient depending on what type of facility is going on. And since the case of your with WADA, there is a monthly board meeting that we're represented on, so that would be an opportunity to work with you on that. But depending on the detail of the project that you're doing, we will probably be having monthly calls or things of that sort if you're doing a new facility, which I know your WADA is considering that. So at some point we would probably, well before that, we'll let you know who, as far as engineering oversight would be done, who that firm would be, and what reports would be given to you that we would need at certain times, besides the difference of the percentages of 30, 60, 90, and 100. So we have done a very good job to lay that out to all those who are doing construction projects, but there are certainly different levels of those, new construction, maintenance, admin, again, dealing transfer centers or smaller projects, things like that. So we do wait to see what the project is first before we give you those details.
All right, thanks. So I got a couple questions from Doug Pickford. Doug, you were asking about the GSA rates for hotels regarding the ACT conference that's coming up this summer. The ACT conference room rates are higher than the GSA rate. And so, yes, your question is correct. We are only going to reimburse you for the GSA rate and then the applied tax rates for that. And if there's a room rate, a fixed room rate, obviously you can get reimbursed for that. But only the GSA rate can we reimburse you for. Let's see. And Karen Taylor had asked a question similar about the ACT conference. Can TDM staff assume that the ACT conference and TDM forum are pre-approved? I still think you should do a pre-check with your DRPT program manager. We've gotten some requests to go to that conference, and people were charging for folks that were not really people who are working on the project or part of the real TDM program. It was kind of other staff that, I don't know, we had some things that, other staff that maybe charged a couple hours, a month to the project because they're doing accounting, we'll kind of go to some overnight travel for some act thing. So it's good for us to see that, to make sure that the people going are people who really work on the project and are going to get something out of the conference. So it's good to just do a little check. And also, we try to, internally we limit our own conference attendees. We don't have 5 or 6 people going to one conference. It's usually limited to 2. So we kind of want to see that too, how many people you're going to these conferences. So Karen, I think the answer to your question is it's good to do the pre-check just so everything's good. I wouldn't assume anything at this point. Let's see. So Larry Welsh asked, is this different from RTAP use request? I'm not sure exactly what you're asking.
Larry, and I guess it maybe was when we were talking about earlier about pre-approval. Of course, if you're applying for RTAP, then you are applying before you go to the training, and so we are doing pre-approval. So that's probably the difference there. And sorry, we clarify that.
All right. So Doug, you asked a question, can we charge our grant for the Adobe software? I think that's the software that Gabe was asking about. So I will say, in a purchase like that where you're using it, you could possibly be using it across multiple grants. I would say charge, do it as a percentage basis, and note that on your invoice. So it's not all just on one grant. Yeah, well, I think he's talking about the TDM operating. So, but, if they've got other operating, I was just going to say they can spread it out. So Christy, you said the chat box is not working. Okay, so I'm not sure why, but let's see. Is the FTA application for federal funds in addition to the grant for all grant receiving funds? It is the FTA application for federal funds in addition to the grant or for all grants receiving funds. Christy, I'm going to open up your mic so you can ask that question.
Yeah. It was a while back, but it was in reference to the TIP, STIP, and filing an FTA application. And I didn't know if that applied to the TDM operating grants because this is all new to me and I really didn't know what those things were referencing.
Okay, no, it does not apply to the TDM operating grants.
Okay. That was easy.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Just taking one more look. Tim, I think your question was answered. I think some folks were having trouble hearing us for a little bit, but that sounds like it's fixed. I think. All right. I think I've answered all the questions in the question box. I'll keep monitoring that now that someone informed me that the chat box doesn't work. And I'm not sure why it doesn't work because I was, yeah, I'm going to send a chat out to everyone. So I just sent out a chat to everyone just that does this work. So you can let me know if it worked or not. Okay, I got a yes. Okay, good. All right, I don't know why the chat might have been down for a little bit, but it seems to be back up. Okay, I got it. You guys, thank you for replying. I'm getting a lot of yeses. So, all right, we're gonna. I think we caught up on questions, so we're gonna move on to the next topic, and so that is on 5310, and we have Brittany Vole, who's one of our transit program managers, will be covering the next couple slides.
All right. So when we drafted the 6-year plan, we reached out to everybody about what vehicles we were putting in there, and then that plan was approved by the CTB this month. So everybody should be aware of what they're getting, but if you're not, take a look at that on the DRPT website to refresh your memory. For those who are going to the CTAP Expo, you'll have the opportunity to look at some of the vehicles that are available. We highly recommend that you do that so that you have an idea of what you might be getting before you get it. In September and October, you'll be working with Chad from Sunny Merriman to specify the vehicle that you want, and you'll confirm that by signing the vehicle order sheet that he'll give you. All of those will come back to me, and we'll put together a final list of everybody's vehicles and then reach out for the local match later this year or early next year. You'll be given a time frame of when those matches are due back, and we'll wait to receive a majority of those before actually placing the vehicle. So it's really important that you send in the match as quickly as you can so you're not delaying your order or another subrecipient's order. And then once the vehicles are ordered, you should be looking to receive those in the early spring through summer of next year. I think this year the vehicles started being delivered, the minivans, in May, so they were coming in really early. Once you receive the vehicle from Sunny Merriman, you'll get a stack of paperwork with that. Make sure that you look through the paperwork that comes with the vehicle and complete the delivery inspection and send that back to me within 2 days of receiving the vehicle, and then enter your vehicle in Trans Am within 5 days. I think everybody who is getting a vehicle is already in Trans Am, but if you're not in there or aren't familiar with how to use it, please let me know so we can get you in before you're at crunch time. So I think that's good on that side. Then Gabe referenced this earlier when he was talking about reimbursement for the 5310 Mobility Management Grant. The new Mobility Management Work Plan is an Excel spreadsheet that was due with all applications. So I have those from pretty much everybody, but if there have been any changes or you thought of something else that you want to add, then reach out to me and let's work on getting those finalized by September 1st. So from September 1st on, we'll consider whatever I have to be your plan for the year. And then going forward, when you're submitting your reimbursement request, the updated plan showing your progress toward the goals that you've set for yourself will be due on a quarterly basis. So in January, April, July, and October, you'll be submitting information with your reimbursement about what you've done for the previous quarter. And if you could, please submit those in the original Excel file rather than a PDF or some other file format. Do you have any questions on that?
Any questions for Brittany on that? All righty. Thank you. Neil.
Okay, and just what we want to review the grant closeout. Submit a final reimbursement request. Final reimbursement request must be submitted for OGA within 90 calendar days after the final expenditure or project end date, whichever occurs first, and we do send out a lot of notification on that process. Check that it is the final reimbursement request, and also complete a project deobligation through OGA. Otherwise, a deobligation is needed for all projects, even those with a zero balance, and that's probably a change that for a lot of grantees that there were some small balances. DRBT could call you and do the deobligation for you, but that is no longer true, and so you will have to, if you don't do it at final reimbursement, we'll have to do a deobligation through the OGA process.
Any questions for Neil on the on how to close out your grant? Yes.
Yes. Yes.
All righty. So if I've missed a question from earlier, or you have a new question, go ahead and type it into the question box. Now that I have that open, I'll be able to see it. So far I don't see any new ones. So we'll move on for the next slides. And these next couple of slides. Hang on a sec. On transit asset management, They're going to be covered by Emily Del Ross, who's our transit programs manager here at DRPT.
Thanks, Chris. So just a quick overview on transit asset management. As most of you probably already know, DRPT uses TransAm as our online system of asset inventory. So this is a place where you're able to enter an asset profile on revenue vehicles, which includes bus, rail, ferry, and other equipment, so non-revenue vehicles and capital equipment, facilities, that includes maintenance, admin, passenger and parking, and infrastructure. DRPT, we ask you to update your asset data twice a year, so that's by July 15th and February 1st. And when you're updating that information, that includes the age, condition, and mileage, if applicable, for any type of those assets. So if they aren't already entered in, then you're entering that asset into TransAm, and if the profile is already entered, then you're just updating that data. Our new merit process is based on what data is in TransAm. So that's a really good incentive for you to be updating that information. We want to make sure that we're basing it off of the correct mileage and state of good repair of those particular assets that you're asking for replacement. There is some guidance about using TransAm on Olga right now. We're working to get some updated information and maybe some more specifics. And when we do, that will be posted again in Olga. Related to transit asset management, I'll be talking now about the transit asset management plan. So the FDA published the transit asset management rule in July of 2016. The purpose of this is to establish a system to monitor and manage public transportation assets to improve safety and increase reliability and performance. So I will go over a very general overview of applicability of this rule, and there are a lot of specifics behind it. So if you do have any kind of detailed questions, we can definitely dive into those if you want to reach out offline or reach out to your program manager. So Tier 1 public transportation providers are considered transit agencies with more than 100 vehicles across all fixed route modes or in one non-fixed route mode, or those agencies that are operating rail. Tier 1 agencies must create their own plans. Those plans need to comply with the 9 requirements that FTA has included in the final rule. Tier 2 public transit providers are transit agencies with 100 vehicles or less across all fixed route modes or in one non-fixed route mode. And these Tier 2 providers can participate in a group plan. DRPT sponsors the Commonwealth Group TAM plan for Tier 2 providers. So right now we have 34 agencies that are currently participating in DRPT's group TAM plan. These Tier 2 agencies only need to comply with basically 4 elements out of the 9 elements that FTA has put in the rule. So it's a bit smaller requirements for those agencies. And that includes a inventory of capital assets, condition assessment, a decision support tool, which will aid in making asset investment decisions, and an investment prioritization, which guides asset investment. So DRPT's first group plan was submitted to FTA back in September of 2018, and the plan has a 4-year horizon, so we'll be updating that plan in October of 2022. So next I'll be talking about public transportation agency safety plans. These are related to transit asset management, so I'll kind of touch on that as well. FTA published the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, or PTASP, in July of 2018, and the purpose of this rule is to promote system safety through safety management system principles. So that's to manage safety risks and prioritize capital investments that promote safety. So this is really the piece that links the PTASP to transit asset management. There are 4 elements that are covered in a PTASP, and that's safety management policy, safety risk management, safety assurance, and safety promotion. The plan also requires performance measures, so fatalities, injuries, safety events, and system reliability in terms of state of good repair. The plan must be signed off by an agency's accountable executive, so this could be a board of directors or equivalent authority. And there's an annual self-certification required as well. So each year you're making sure that your agency is still compliant with your PTASP. As far as applicability, all public transportation systems receiving 5307 funds must create a safety plan. 5307s with more than 100 vehicles in peak revenue service or those that are operating rail must create their own plan. 5307s with 100 vehicles or less in peak revenue service can be part of a group plan. So again, DRPT is sponsoring the Commonwealth Group PTASP. There are 14 agencies that are participating in DRPT's group plan, and I've already been in contact with you if you are one of those agencies, so you probably already know that. We will be hosting a kickoff webinar to kind of dive more into what PTASP is and what those requirements will be of you and your agency. We're looking to host that sometime in July, so there'll be I'll be sending out updated information and an invite about that in the coming weeks. So on either Trans Am, TAM in general, or PTASP, if you have any specific questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or contact your DRPT program manager, and we can kind of dive more into that.
All right. Any questions on asset management or the safety plans? All right. So a couple things. One, I got a note from someone very helpful about hotel rates. So I want to backtrack on that. I think Doug, you dropped off the call, but this kind of pertains to Doug Pitt's question. So if you're going to a conference and the official conference rate is above the GSA rate, a lot of times when you call that hotel and you tell them you have to get the GSA rate or the government rate, they will give you the government rate. So I just got an email from someone that said that's exactly what they did for the ACT conference. When they called, they were able to obtain the government rate. So just because the conference whoever's putting on the conference says, oh, we got a great rate for you, here's the rate, click here and give her, the code and you'll get this lower rate. It's probably a lower rate, but you could still call and get the government rate. So I just thank you, Emily Cass, for reminding me of that. And then Joy's got a question for me. So yes, we're recording this right now, this whole webinar, the slides and the quick Q&A and all the presenters' talks, and it will be up on Olga later this week. So if you've missed part of it, you can go through it there, just download it and play it from Olga. Then again, also you can always ask questions of your DRPT program manager. We got a question or a comment from Maria. They want to be part of DRPT's group plan for the safety plans. How do we confirm fact?
That's Suffolk.
Maria Patowski?
Yes. They are.
Okay.
Suffolk. Yes.
Okay. I'm getting a yes from Neil and Emily that you are part of the plan. So again, if you want to call to confirm that also and get what your next steps are, that would be good too. But they gave me a yes and a thumbs up that you are part of it. All right. All right. Seeing no other questions, try to. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. All right. So for the wrap up and the smart scale, we have Grant Sparks, who's manager of transit planning and corridor development for DRPT.
Good morning, everyone. Quickly, just to recap, Smart Scale Round 3, which was the projects were approved by CTB last week. We had 8 transit projects that were selected in Round 3 for a total of $187 million. That's about 21% of the funding went towards transit projects. Transit and TDM projects continue to be competitive under Smart Scale. So we want to work with you all on Round 4, which will be here before we know it, next calendar year. A few things to point out regarding Smart Scale Round 4. Applicant eligibility will not change as far as we know it. Transit agencies, PDCs, MPOs, and local governments will all still be eligible to apply. The Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment, OIPI, is considering some changes to the technical program guidance, specifically in the areas of project eligibility and project readiness. Currently eligible transit and TDM projects must expand capacity. This piece will not change, but an additional prerequisite is being considered, and if that is approved, it will narrow the types of transit projects just a little bit. We should have a determination on this sometime this summer. And then as for project readiness, OIPI will likely be requiring applicants to provide a little bit more documentation that helps justify readiness. This shouldn't have a major impact on transit and TDM projects. The only area that might be impacted will be projects that support new transit service. So we're looking at requiring feasibility studies and things of that nature to support those types of applications and projects. So last but not least, I just wanted to give everyone a heads up that we do offer technical assistance for Smart Scale projects. So if you have a project that you're interested in applying for Smart Scale, we do ask that you contact us by September 1st of this year, just so we can balance our workloads and work with you all on making sure that 1, you're a good fit for Smart Scale, and 2, you have a competitive application. So that's all I have for Smart Scale.
All right, let's pause there. Does anyone have any question for Grant about Smart Scale? All right, I'm not seeing any questions pop up. So wait. We do. Kelly, thank you, Kelly. So Kelly Hitchcock, when is the final application for Smart Scale Round 4? When does that due?
So I believe the timeline is in March. The portal will open and you get to do your pre-apps. And so I believe I'll have to look back, but I believe it's early next summer is when the Round 4 applications will be due.
Okay. And there'll be a more formal announcement, Kelly, when it opens up for the pre-application period. There'll be all the dates will be there when that goes. Okay. Anyone else? All right. I'm gonna wrap up.
All right. So just to close out, a few things that we've been working on. DRPT is in the process of updating the Merit OLGA application system with the hope of streamlining it and organizing it to make it a little bit more user-friendly. We are going to be working on this throughout the summer and into the early fall, and this is for both the transit and TDM grants. The implementation of Merit and lessons learned from the FY20 application process means that DRPT will need to make changes to the OLGA transit applications, and lessons learned from the TDM application process also makes it necessary to revise the applications so that the information needed to evaluate applications is a little bit more clear and transparent. and the expected results of a project is better defined. The changes will improve the application and evaluation process and improve accountability. So just to be aware, all FY20 transit and TDM applicants will receive a survey to provide feedback on the application process, and then results of this survey will help guide DRPT's changes to the FY21 application. As far as demonstration, technical assistance, and intern grant programs goes, we are reviewing these programs, and we do anticipate some modifications to each of these programs. We're working on that this summer, and this is for FY21. The purpose is really to just review all of them and better define their purpose, project eligibility, and the requirements for each. So we will be holding some fall grant workshops in October and November timeframe, and we'll be clarifying these different programs and change guidance at these workshops. Transit and TDM strategic plans. Last year we developed a set of new requirements for our transit agencies to prepare transit strategic plans. These were for some of our larger agencies, and essentially these were enhanced transit development plans. We do have a few pilots going through the transit strategic plan process right now, and once those plans get close to the finish line, we plan on revising those guidelines to just refine the process a little bit more and hopefully improve on it. We're hoping to release that updated guidance at the end of the summer. And then for the agencies who are still required to do transit development plans, so the smaller agencies, we will be working on some new guidance there as well, which will likely scale back on the TDP requirements. Hoping to get that done at the end of the summer as well. And then on the TDM side, we are finalizing the guidance and requirements for the TDM strategic plans. We ask that any agency planning on starting work on their TDM strategic plan in FY20 wait until the guidance and requirements are released and you discuss them with the DRPT staff. And then the second to last bullet point, we do ask that you download and read the grant administration procedures that Emily has worked so hard on. The link is on this slide. But if you have any questions about these procedures, we do ask that you reach out to your program manager for assistance so we can answer your questions. And I believe that is it.
Yeah, so thank you, Grant. So we'll take that's all we have as far as presentations. So we'll take the next minute or two if you want to ask some more questions that you have. You know, it's well before noon, so we've got time. We'll be here. So if you want to, I'll give you a minute if you want to type in another question. We'll be glad to answer them. And of course, if you think of something later on or right after this, we keep saying this, but reach out to your DRPT program manager. We are here to help. So if it's today or tomorrow or any time during the year, they are here. We are here to answer your questions. I'm not seeing any questions coming in. So I'll give it a couple more seconds. And all right, so I don't see, oh, here we go. I knew someone was going to send something. Karen Taylor asked, can you give a brief overview of what the TDM strategic plan will entail? So it is very similar to the current TDM guidance that we had, I think back in 2013 is when we developed those, when you guys were doing your updates to your long-range TDM plan. So it's very similar to that. However, one thing we've changed, and this is kind of based on the change that came out on the transit side, is to make the plans more strategic in nature. So the TDM plans tend to be very broad brush. You know, we want to do all of these things all over the place. And of course, that's not really how how you be more effective, how you can be effective on a TDM plan. Some of these things are targeted. You're not going to do, you're going to target certain employer outreach in certain areas and things like that. So the changes will be more of a nature of collecting more data so that you can be more strategic in your approach and outreach and target marketing. The other thing is also a change is that we're going to ask you to kind of put into the strategic plan your plan for marketing and promotion. Again, those things go hand in hand. So you've got your program operational side that has a strategic component to it or a strategic focus, and then your marketing should also match that. So those are the two big changes. I would say that it is, but otherwise it's very similar to the other one. It's still going to be, the current year with a 5-year outlook for planning and also financial needs. And then Karen, you asked follow-up. So when will these plans need to be completed? So we're going to give you guys a couple of years to kind of do your overall, basically redo your TDM plan to a TDM strategic plan. But in the meantime, we're going to ask you next year when you go in for your grant application, so January 1st, we're going to ask you for some type of update of your current plan. And then those updates, annual updates, will follow along very similar to the transit plan updates, just an annual update. Let us know if any major things have changed, if there's something where the financing has changed or the needs have changed. And that will be kind of just in a letter form. Doesn't need to be a whole big plan change. But to do the big strategic plan, I don't even call that an update. I think we just need to start a fresh look at the TDM plans. When you do that strategic plan, that will be on a 2-year horizon. So we want to get everyone to kind of do their updates over the next couple of years. Any other questions about anything else we covered? Or maybe something procedure we didn't cover, but, stay on topic. All right, I don't see anything else. So this concludes the Spring Grant Workshop and webinar. I want to thank all of you for attending and participating and asking questions, and you all have a good rest of your day. Thank you.